It's just one of those days where we go live for you and for me. Yeah. All right. So, writers out there, you have a story. You write your story out, particularly maybe in a script. However, you could utilize what I'm about to show you today for a novel as well, because it comes down to conversation, comes down to developing a narrative. So, get the most out of your narrative is what we are going to talk about today. So, let's get right to it. I'm your host, Thomas J. Beleza. Please like, comment, and share the video along with subscribing for future content on how to be successful in your career, specifically in the entertainment industry. Let's get right to it. Okay, so we're going to write this out in real time. Let's see if we put this over here a little bit. Boom, look at that. Perfect. Okay, so this is our step, right? So in a script, let's just go with a script first. So in a script, right, let's say it's interior, right? Interior crocodile, right? Interior, right? And then let's say it's Mike's house. We're not really dealing with format today, but just so you could see it in real time. Interior, Mike's house. Maybe it's Mike's house living room. Okay. All right. And then, of course, what is the time? Let's just say it's today. All right. So a narrative, the point of narrative when you're telling a story in the beginning is just to make sure you get all those beats out. There are 27 beats traditionally. However, if you look at a three-act structure, that's how I do it. So each act is broken into 3 blocks. Each of those blocks are broken into 3 beats. So it's 27 altogether, right? Because if you look at the math, right, you got Act 1, right, has 3 sections. Okay, Act 2 has 3 sections, and Act 3 has 3 sections. Okay, as you can see. And then each of these have 3 beats, 3 beats, 3 beats. So what is this? This is 9. So if it's 9, 9, and 9, it's 27 beats. All right? So it's important to know that there are 27 beats you're supposed to hit. So what does that mean? It means that when you're telling a story or a scene, because even in a novel, you have scenes. There are scenes in your novels. All right? You want to make sure, no matter how long the scene is, or the moment, you want to hit that beat. So let's say we're trying to establish the ordinary world. Okay, in the ordinary world, a couple things we want to hit is, maybe who are they? Who are they? And they would be referring to your main character, maybe a couple of the other supporting characters. Maybe there's 2 main characters. We don't know, right? The world around them, or even their life. Okay, so their life might be daily tasks or whatever. Okay, so the world around them is like, are they in LA? Are they, right? What year is it? Is it let's say it's New York. It looks like N4, by the way. New York 99. Okay, so that's the world around them. It's New York 1999. So what is New York during that time? What is New York, right? So we know we have to establish that in 99 there weren't a lot of cell phones, so we could say no cell phones. However, there were but they just weren't prevalent. Like not everybody had them, and they were just kind of coming out. They were probably like the big Nokia chunkies, right? There's no cell phones. What about 99 New York? Oh, everyone's a Y2J, Y2J, the Y2J virus, right? By the way, I might be getting that mixed up with Chris Jericho. Um, Y2J, I think I am Y2. But there was a virus everyone was worried about, right? Whatever. You have to think like that. Like, what is their world? So figure out what New York in '99 was like. Okay, and obviously we want to party like it's 1999. Okay, just keep that in mind. Always party like it's 1999. Anyway, so when you're trying to figure out your beats, we're focusing on today. Right. Well, right in this second, we're going to focus on the first beat. first beat, which is ordinary world. And how do we get the most out of our narrative is like this, okay? So we're trying to establish the world around them, who they are, and their life, their daily life, you know, the things they go through, okay? The other thing is, what are the rules? What are the rules of world? Okay, so, hey, how's it going? Tracker Killer, welcome, welcome. Feel free to ask questions on what I'm talking about. I have no problem answering them. That's what we do here, right? Okay, so one of the big things is when you're writing narrative, especially for the first beat of your story is always about in Act One. What is their ordinary world? So we want what are the rules of your world? So with Harry Potter, we have to discover that there's magic in the world, right? You know, because Hagrid comes and he takes Harry Potter, but before he takes Harry Potter, what happens, right? We learn it is a narrative of a show, a movie, a novel. This works with script, doesn't matter. I'm going to do a script format today. So interior, Mike's house, living room, day. This is all going to be about, but it is not just for scripts. You can use the information I'm giving you for any form of story, including songwriting, so music and stuff like that, right? So with Harry Potter, before Hagrid comes, his ordinary world, we're showing the rules that he lives in a closet, he lives with his family, he's not very happy, right? So all these things are a part of his ordinary world. So who is Harry Potter? Harry Potter's shy. His family doesn't really treat him like he has any worth, right? The world around him, it's England or London, wherever it is in England. All right, and then the life in his daily life. His daily life is he lives in the closet. He has to do chores, etc., etc. Okay, so with that said, sometimes what happens when people write stories is they'll do this, right? They'll go like, well, let's get the action anyway. Let's see, Mike, right, 30s, sits on his couch, right? Okay. He flips through channels. Okay. Let's say his friend Steve. By the way, when you come up with names, come up with better names than Mike and Steve. But this is just your name should have some basis. His friend Steve walks through door or front door. Okay, what do we got over here? Did you know that a lot of the outside shots of Hogwarts was filmed in Scotland? I did not know that. Thank you for that. Here, I'll even put that on the screen. That's interesting. We always like to learn little tidbits. Thank you for that, Tracker Killer. This is off of the Twitch accounts for those watching on YouTube and Facebook group. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that little tidbit. I personally am I love that kind of stuff. All right, so here we go. The action in the script is Mike, 30, sits on his couch. He flips through channels. His friend, Steve, 30s, walks through front door. Boom, right? Now, this is the thing, though. Most people, what they'll write is like, I just want to work on character. And so what they'll have is like, Mike will be like, yo, what's up, right? Okay, and then Steve's like, nothing, hanging out. Now, this is the problem. We're not establishing anything yet. There's no narrative world yet, all right? So when you're writing, one of the strongest tools you could utilize is just get the narrative out first. And then you could go back, because I'm telling you right now, everything you write is a first draft. You'll never write anything and then be like, it is done. First of all, you got to edit it anyway. You got to clean it up, all this stuff like that. So when you're writing, instead of trying to write character, not that you can't write character, but if you focus on just like character and like, what does the scene look like? Write your scenes and your outlines with what is narratively important. So right now, what we're getting is, all right, we already know that these two people, first of all, we know they're friends, but in dialogue, we know this casual. He He just walks through the front door. So visually, we get it. His real world is that this guy just comes in and out of his life. We get that, but we're not leading to anything of worth yet. So before you get into what this is also wasted dialogue, by the way, and I've seen this in scripts. What you want to do is instead of like focusing on stuff like this before you even get anything going, let's figure out. Let's say the outline is saying that our first beat, our ordinary world, is we have to establish the friendship between Steve and Mike, because let's say our story is going to be that Steve is actually secretly dating Mike's sister, and in the past, Mike said because they've been friends for, let's say, 15 years, and so all right, so right off the bat, 15 years, friends, okay, don't date sister, okay. So these are narrative points of the real world. Okay, we have to establish these before we can have the conflict, either with humor or with drama, right? So with this, we know that we have to establish 15 years, that they are friends for 15 years, and that there are certain rules in place. There are certain rules. And we don't have to say in this first scene or the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie that Steve can't date the sister, but maybe we have to show the value of the sister to Mike, and that he doesn't necessarily well, he's very protective of his sister, okay? And maybe he knows something about Steve, right? That makes Steve not really worthy of his sister. All right. But yo, what's up? And nothing, hanging out. Figured I'd come over. Figure I'd come over. Maybe go get food together. Get food, whatever. Okay. This is just basic dialogue, and it's not doing anything. And before we have earned the right to kind of add this character, or add this a little bit of your style, your voice, your brand in writing, because every writer, how do we create our voice as a writer? Well, it's how we write and what we write, and the subcontext of what's in our stories that really dictates our brand. And that's how you find your voice as a writer. You say, what do I really want to talk about? What kind of themes are important to me? What are there lessons or missions that I'm trying to add value to through telling my stories, right? So something we could do with 15 years is very simple. When Steve walks through, you could literally have Steve be like, is it me, or is Saturday our 15-year anniversary, right? And by the way, what does that do? It makes the audience go, what are these people, lovers, right? Or are they together, right? And then Mike goes, I don't think that's as important as you think, since I've never woken up in bed with you. And then Steve might say, that's not true. There was that one time when we went on vacation with your family, where we had to share the same bed. And he goes, ha ha ha, it was either that or you slept in the room with my sister, and she's 3 years younger than you, and I think we were 20, and that would have been inappropriate. Right? And Steve's like, yeah, back then it would have been inappropriate. And then Mike says, it's also inappropriate now. Okay, so we got all of that into the first scene, the first beat, and then I can consider that scene basically done, right? So now you need so you got the intro, you got the mid or the body, and then you got the outro, okay, of every scene. Okay, and with every scene, even in a novel, the intro, I basically did it. We set it up. Mike is sitting on the couch. He flips through channels. Steve walks through. Can you believe? Is it me, or is Saturday our 15-year anniversary? All right, we already set up the intro. How he comes in it. We know what their friendship is like. We think they might even be together. But in the second line goes, I don't think that's really important because we've never slept together. It's not our thing. And he's like, well, actually, we did back in the day. I had to sleep with you when we went. When I came on vacation with your family. We're setting up so much. We're setting up background on them, and it's a casual conversation, whatever the case. And we're also setting up the sister thing. It was inappropriate. It wouldn't be inappropriate now, though. I mean, we're all adults, right? Because they're in their 30s, so that means she's probably in her 20s, right? Late 20s. And he's like, no, I think that would still be inappropriate now. So we already set up everything. So we literally have the intro and the mid. So how do we do the outro? Right? The outro can be, well, is it inappropriate for us to go get food? Do we go Dutch, or are you paying this time since I got last time? And then Mike goes, you know what? I'll pay as long as we get to go to my favorite restaurant. And now, by the way, that doesn't have to necessarily mean that we're writing a comedy, but we're writing that these two have a rapport, a good rapport, and they go, yeah, let's go get food. So we already set up the ordinary world, and I bet you that would have been maybe 3 out of, let's say we're going to do a 90-minute movie. So if it's 90 minutes, that means 45 as a, okay. So if it's a 90-minute movie, the act 2 is about 45 pages. Act 1 is about 15 pages. So now we have 12 pages left, and that's good, because if there are, if act 1, we have to establish the ordinary world, the inciting incident. That means the next beat we have to hit is the inciting incident. And remember, you can expand on these scenes. You could expand on chapters. You could. I've talked about this in previous videos. Usually on Wednesdays, I do creative lessons, and Monday through Friday, minus Wednesday, I do more like how to run your career like a business for entertainers. But you can, like in a chapter, let's say the inciting incident is your second beat, right? That's the second beat in any story. It's always the inciting incident. It's ordinary world and inciting incident. That doesn't mean you only have to do one chapter for inciting incident. It means you could do leading up to inciting incident as a chapter, the actual inciting incident is a chapter, and then leading away from the inciting incident is a chapter. All right. And that's even before we get to reflects on the actual inciting incident. So we've talked about it in Hunger Games. So in Hunger Games, the inciting incident is that the reaping is happening and the sister gets picked in the lotto, and she goes, no, I'll do it. And she does the Boy Scout thing or whatever she does. And she goes, I will be tribute. The reaction to that inciting incident is literally the next moment where she's saying goodbye to her family, and then she has to pack up and she has to leave and get on the train to go. So it happens in big movies and normal stories. It's like the inciting incident is that whole reaping scene, right? And then the reaction to that inciting incident is the whole saying goodbye scene. But as a writer, if you look at those scenes, and I'm not saying Hunger Games is an amazing movie, but it's a very easy movie to look at to explain beats and narrative. If you look at that movie, they just got everything they needed to into that scene. But if you really look at the scene, they add character. And character, by the way, is the way they interact, right? And that's what I was saying earlier is, yo, what's up? Not much. Just figured I'd come over. Maybe we'll go get food. Hasn't established anything. There's no narrative in there. So the way we get the most out of our narrative is let the narrative dictate their character. So again, Steve walks in. He goes, is it me or is Saturday our 15th anniversary? What that's saying is Steve thinks highly of the relationship. We haven't figured it out yet. And again, we don't know if they're together or not. And then Mike's like, it's not even, I don't think it works like that since we've never slept together. Hey, that's not true. There was that one time I went away with your family on vacation, and we had to sleep in the same bed. And he goes, well, it was either that or you shared a room with my sister, who was 3 years younger than you at the time. That would have been completely inappropriate. And then Steve, well, yeah, but nowadays, since we're all in our 30s, it's not inappropriate at all. And Mike's like, I think that would be completely inappropriate still. There's so much character in the way they're responding. You're hearing Mike's voice, Mike's motives, his thought process, and you're hearing Steve's thought process. And then they get at it and you go, well, Steve says, is it inappropriate for us to go get food? And Mike says, it's not. Is it inappropriate if we go get food and we go Dutch? And then Mike might say, well, I'll be happy to pay as long as I get to pick the restaurant. And they go, are you sure we're not in a relationship? And Steve says that. And Mike might say, I don't know, the night's still young, right? So we get their relationship. They're not fighting. There's no harsh, but they were able to say things that were truthful, and now they lead to the restaurant. But what happens at the restaurant? Maybe the inciting incident at the restaurant is going to be, here we go, right? So the inciting incident can absolutely be where Steve is going to tell Mike that he's been dating the sister. Or you can make it more dramatic, and you can make it Steve's not going to tell Mike, but Steve is getting text, or because it's New York 1999, maybe Steve keeps checking his watch, and he's like, "Hey, can we hurry this up?" Right? And in the diner scene or the food scene, whatever, maybe the sister's there. And now you're creating the narrative is that we're just focusing on narrative right now. We're not just focusing on just like, can I write stuff? Can I just, it'll be a cool scene if like, Aquaman is at the end of the dock and water shoots up and he throws down a bottle of liquor. And it's like, but why? But why? Like, why is that there? Like, what is the point? It looks beautiful on screen, but it's not telling a narrative. And when you're trying to get the most out of your narrative, you focus on what do you need to accomplish in that scene, what brings people to the scene, and what is keeping people in the scene. Now, in this situation, the only thing keeping people in the scene was clearly that Mike was waiting for Steve, or Mike had literally nothing to do. He's bored out of his mind because he's flipping through the channels, and Steve is the basically the incentive to leave because he's like, hey, I'm starving, let's go get food. So now there's no reason for them to even stay in this scene, so now they have to leave the scene. Okay, and if you watch movies or read books, if you notice, a lot of the change in scenery is because it's either A, dictating a new character, so they might be like, what's a good example? I don't know if you watched The Blacklist or anything like that, but Reddington was talking. I'm not going to give any spoils away, but Reddington was talking to his friend, Rumor, Mr. Rumor, whatever his first name. I can't remember his first name, but he's talking to his main guy, and he's like, "Oh, we have to find X, Y. We have to find Sir blank, blank, blank." And then they look at each other and go, okay, right? But the next scene is Elizabeth Keene. She's literally doing what? She's walking into a building, and who's at the table is the guy that Reddington was saying they need to meet. So even though Reddington didn't go to that place, that location, we're leading narratively to understand who this person is. We might not even know the person's name yet, right? But Elizabeth Keene comes in and she goes, Mr. So-and-so? And he's like, yeah, oh, Miss Keene, I have, I'm surprised to see you here. So narratively, they got that out of the way. They still got us out of the room. There was a need to leave that room, and the need to leave that room was this person they mentioned. And if you know that, you can read books and watch movies or television shows, and you'll see the cues where if they mention someone's name, that means in the next scene or within the next two scenes, that person is probably going to show up. There's like a movie with Will Smith. I'm not going to give the name of the movie away. But in the very beginning of the movie, he's talking to Rob, the girl that plays from Suicide Squad. She plays Harley Quinn. Robbie, I can't remember her last name. But they literally have a scene where he's like, well, I don't really know my father. I haven't seen him in a long time. He's not my life. I don't know who he is. And instantly I was like, he's either the villain or he's going to pop up in the end and he's going to be the thing that saves him. It's going to be either one of those. And what happens is at the highlight, the midpoint of the movie, he is both the villain and the person that saves him, which is ridiculous. But that's what happens. Narratively, you got to get out your narrative points. So even if you're writing a novel, like if I was writing a novel and I change this and I go, Mike sits on his couch. Mike sits on his couch. His body, absorbs into it as if he's been there for days. He flips through the channels. It's almost as if the sound of the sound of what would you call that noise? The static sound of each channel going from one to the next is music to his ears. He's not even paying attention of the flies or the silence with the silence beyond the TV. the door slams open with the energy of familiarity. Steve, his buddy Steve, charts in dialogue. Yo, man, is it me or is Saturday our 15-year anniversary? And we don't have to say he says, because we know he says. How do we know he says? Because in books, hi, if you have quote unquote, we already know he says. You don't always have to say he says, and you don't, this is in novels, by the way. You don't always have to say he says or she says. You don't have to say Steve says. The only time you really need to add that extra something something is if it's confusing narratively. For example, if there's 4 people in the story, like let's say there's Steve, Mike, Jim, Ralph, and we might start off with Steve says in that instance. We might, but you don't have to. There are actually books. There are books out there where they don't ever use he said, she said, or Steve said, or Chris says, or Mike says, or Jim says, because it's not really necessary if the narrative is clear. So what are we talking about today before we really end it? And remember to like, comment, and share this video along with subscribing for future content on how to be successful in your career, specifically in the entertainment industry. All right. So how do we get the most out of a narrative? Let's just talk about that real quick, and then we could call it a day, right? Because I like to keep these lessons short. The first thing is hit our beats. All right. Now this is why I like to outline. I'm not saying you have to. There are pantsers. There are people that are just like, I'm going to write. But even Quentin Tarantino, he outlines loosely. If at minimum, he'll outline from Act 1 to the end of Act 2, or more recently, he's been doing like Act 1 to the midpoint, and then he's like, wherever I hit in the midpoint, I'm going to let the characters dictate to the end. So he's like an outliner pantser, all right? But I like, so when I teach, I'm teaching about how to use your outline. So if you know your outline should be filled with beats, not scenes, not like, oh, we need to see Aquaman getting splashed up by water. Like that wouldn't be there. But the in that scene, it would be Bruce Wayne finds Aquaman. Aquaman is, that's be, you know, so it would be like Bruce, right, finds Aquaman, right, and then Aquaman wants nothing to do with it. By the way, not to really knock that movie, because I don't like the knock art. You know, it is what it is. This is a terrible scene, and I'll tell you why. It's fake tension. Okay, for a couple of reasons. Bruce finds Aquaman and says, "Look, and there's this horrible thing happening. We need to come together and work." And Aquaman's like, "I don't care." But if you see the Aquaman movie, now the Aquaman movie is stupid because who he is as a character doesn't make any sense. His motivations is to drink and not care and just want to go back in the water. And it's like, no, he does care. He does, because Aquaman takes place after this movie. And you might say, well, maybe the events of this movie makes him care. But I think it's wasted. They were just trying to make like, they were like, hey, let's have Batman have a little pushback to get the team together. But now, when you're writing out your outline, you could say to yourself, well, what's the point of this scene? Could I use this time on paper to do something more? Could it be, we know that Bruce needs to get Aquaman, right? So what about Bruce being in a situation that can help Aquaman, right? Instead of him being like, oh, well, I'm a drunk. And he could still be a drunk, but like, you know, and then Aquaman's like, well, I don't really need your help, you know, Batman. I'm 400 times stronger than you. I'm resilient. My body, I'm impervious almost. I'm basically a weaker version of Superman, except I can't fly unless it's through the water. And Bruce is like, oh, all right, well. But instead, he's like, I'm Batman. And Aquaman's like, whatever, I don't care. So, you know, if you can't make sense of the scene, you know that your beats aren't working. But if you are going to write beats, so again, hit our beats. If we want our outline, we want establish Mike and Steve's world sister, because we have to bring up the sister, especially if we were saying the narrative is leading to what? Steve being in a relationship with the sister. And what's our tension? Mike doesn't really want him in that. So instead of it just being he doesn't want him dating her, we have to, what's known as, this is the other thing, you want to seed. You want to seed. We seed that Mike is not comfortable with the sister thing by having the line, well, it would have been, because it would have been appropriate if you were in the same bed with her, because she was 3 years younger than us and we weren't even 20 back then. And then Steve says, well, it wouldn't be that inappropriate now because we're in our 30s. And then Mike goes, I don't know, it probably would, it seems like it would still be inappropriate. So we're seeding that exists, because in writing you don't want to Deus ex machina, where it's just like, like, we have to stop the bad guy, but we don't know how. Well, we have the sword. Where did we get the sword? It exists. Like, why does that sword kill them? Why have a sword that kills them? Well, why? Because we need it right now. That's bad narrative. So you want to see that, we need the MacGuffin. We need the sword MacGuffin. So you have to see the sword MacGuffin in some way. It's like, this person's been doing a lot of crazy stuff. No one could stop him. If only we could find the sword of blank, blank, blank. And there you go. Now you have to quest for the sword of blank, blank, blank. Like, for example, the ring from Lord of the Rings. They don't just go, this is a very important ring. They literally have this whole narrative in the, it talks about, but they even have The Hobbit, which is a whole other book before the Lord of the Rings that is really explaining how powerful the ring is. There's a lot of seeding. And that's why you're like, this ring is bad news. Okay. So to get the most out of your narrative, you want to hit our beats. We need to hit our beats, whatever they are. You got each, remember, Act One has 3 blocks. Okay. And each of those blocks have 3 beats within each block. Okay. And every act is like that. Every act has the same, they have different beats, but they all have 3 sections, 3 beats, right? Okay. Same thing. Okay. And you want to hit our beats. And the way we understand that is you write out your outline. And in the beginning, when you write an outline, you could just kind of write down what it is you want to have happen before you start putting it in order. Outlines, you can start moving it around as you get there. But you might be like, your first out. Oh, 1 second. A little. Let me fix that for you. Getting a little. Anyway, so first, like when you first write an outline, it might just be something as simple as my story is going to be about, let's say, Steve and Mike are best friends for 15 years. Mike is very protective of his sister. Steve ends up with his sister. It causes a breach in their relationship, but it turns out Steve and Mike's sister have been together for 2 years secretly, and Steve wants to ask her to marry him. So the whole movie is about him trying to get Mike to approve it and be happy for the relationship. And it's not just a fling. And that Steve wants to get married, and the movie should end with Mike approves it, and Mike is literally the he gets ordained, and through the Universal Life Church, and he ends up being the person that marries. And there you go. You got a freaking movie. And that, by the way, is the outline mission. And now all I have to do is figure out, well, how do I get there? We know where it ends. We know that Mike is going to be approving it. We know he's going to officiate it, right? And maybe that's the surprise. So in the outline, we go, they don't know that he's going to officiate it, but he agrees to be the best man. But then he asks Steve to get someone else to be the best man. And Steve's like, why? And he's like, I don't know if I could be the best man. And then Steve's like, man, I really would. And he's like, no, you guys still get married, but I don't know. Is it okay that I'm not the best man? Right. And then maybe Steve and the sister get a priest or something like that. But then the priest is like, instead of the priest showing up when they get married, it's Mike. And they're like, oh, right. And then you got a moment. And then you write that in the outline. So what that means is our beats would be that we want to lead to that moment. So we know that a beat has to be him saying, I can't be the officiator. There has to be a beat where he eventually says, I agree to the marriage. There has to be a beat where Steve comes clean and says, hey, we've been together. So these are your beats. You have to hit our beats. We're not talking about necessarily writing anything crazy right now, but the character comes out of those beats. Okay. And you need the seed. All right. So to get the most out of your narrative, you got to hit our beats and we got to hit our seeds. After that, say more with less. And there's a reason we do that. It's because if you could say more with less, Marlon Brando was notoriously famous for this. He would get a page and a half or 2 pages of script, and he would basically be like, "Can I try something?" And the director would be like, "Can you try to do the words?" And he'd be like, "I'll do the words, but if I'm allowed to also try it my way." And then what he would do is he'd be able to say everything that's on that page in emotion by emoting and action. And he would be able to represent, because you don't always have to say things, right? The behavior of a response to things is very powerful. And then they would end up going with Marlon Brando's choice because they're like, this is genius. And remember, for scripts, every word, every line, I should say, every line on that page is money. It costs money for every line, every minute, right? But in a novel, if you can get your story in the least amount of pages, now you've earned the right to start fluffing it up with some, brand voicing, like Anne Rice. I want to describe the wall for 2 pages. If you can get the narrative in there, then you can start dressing up the scenes, right? So get the most out of your narrative, hit our beats, seed as much as possible, but don't be outright. Don't be like, we need the sword of so and so, right? And it's going to be because that's just exposition, right? But seeding might be like, if there was only a weapon or something that could stop this person, that's the first seed. And maybe we don't have to answer it right now. You can answer it later, right? You want to say more with less to earn, all right, fluff. Okay. Some writers will fluff out scenes, and then what do they get from their editor? Hey, can you cut back 10,000 words, right? The other thing is, like, with scripts, here's the thing with a script. I know there's a lot of stuff on this one. I write a lot. Okay. 30-minute show is 24 to 27 pages. Okay. But 24 is where your producer's going to want it or the studio's going to want it. Just because it's a 30-minute show doesn't mean it's 30 pages, because 30 pages is 30 minutes. But even if you have commercials or any of that, if it's on HBO or Netflix, they still want you to come in under the 30 minutes. Even like if you watch like Lucifer on Netflix, they could do a whole hour, but they don't always do a whole hour. But sometimes they'll do more than an hour, and sometimes they earn that because they'll do shorter episodes. The other thing is, like, if it's a 90-minute movie, right? You don't want to do 90 pages. You want to do like 85 pages. Okay? But honestly, it doesn't really, in the long game, it doesn't matter, because once you prove your value sets and you start developing strong relationships, and as a producer, a writer, and or a director, if you do what they expect, and the movie is $1 million, and then the movie makes, say, 5 million or 10 million, right? Now you're going to be like, can I do another one? And that's what happened with James Cameron. James Cameron gave up his rights, his money for Titanic, and he put in some of his own money to film that whole movie because they were way over budget. And the movie obviously broke records. So then when he was like, I want to do this Avatar movie, they were like, how much money do you need? And the reason is because he did what he could in their rules, and then he broke expectations, and they're like, ah. So what happened when Avatar came out? It also broke all the records. So they're going to say whatever you want. So real quick, to get the most out of your narrative, hit our beats, which is out of our acts. You want to seed as much as when possible. And seeding is for everything. Seeding relationships falling apart, seeding relationships coming together, seeding a job opportunity, seeding. You might even want to seed in Act 1 the whole of Act 1. You want to seed Act 2. And in Act 2, you want to seed Act 3. In Act 1, you might even want to seed Act 3. In fact, if you know you're doing a trilogy or even companion books or companion movies or whatever, you want to seed those future things. If you're writing a TV show, the best thing you could do is seed the other episodes. You could seed other seasons, because you don't want be like, well, where do we go now with the character? And then the next season, it would just make stuff up, and you're like, where the hell is this coming from, right? So say more with less to earn fluff is the other thing. And I would say finally, to get the most out of your narrative, okay? Write what needs to happen straight to points. Okay. Now, the reason you do this is the same thing with the, like, let's say the Mike and Steve scene that I did earlier. Let's say if it's straight to the point, it'd be Steve comes in and goes, "Hey, we've been friends for 15 years," and Steve is like, "I don't know why that's important." Or actually, this is what writing straight might look like. Steve walks through and goes, "Hey, we've been friends for 15 years." It doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter if we get food. And we go, "Oh, wait, I'm failing to hit our beats, and I'm failing to hit our beats and failing to seed. But I hit all my narrative points. I just need Steve to come in and say, we've been friends for 15 years, right? But I need to hit those beats. So maybe I'll write, hey, we've been friends for 15 years. Yeah, well, a lot happens in 15 years. And we're like, we're not getting really any character out of this. So that's why you look to your establish the sister thing and everything. You go, hey, how do I get them to talk about that right away? And that's where my brain went to and I could say it over and over again because it just makes sense with the narrative. Hey, is it me or is Saturday our 15th anniversary, 15-year anniversary? I don't know if that matters because we've never actually slept together. And he goes, well, we did once when I went to vacation with your family. And he goes, well, we had to because it was either you shared a bed with me or you shared a bed with my sister, and she was 3 years younger than you. And we weren't even 20, so that's completely inappropriate. And then Steve, well, maybe it's but now we're in our 30s, so it wouldn't be too inappropriate. And Mike's like, I think it would still be inappropriate. And Steve's like, well, would it be inappropriate for you to go with me to get some food and maybe go Dutch? Well, Mike says, well, I'll be happy to pay as long as I get to pick the restaurant. Oh, all right, that sounds sort of like we're dating. And he goes, well, the night is still young. So we hit all our beats, we seeded, and we said more with less because we just let the characters get out what was needed instead of it going. Steve walks through the door. Hey, Mike, just sitting there? What are you doing? Nothing. Well, you want to go do something? I guess we could go do something. Well, you look like you're bored out of your mind. You're just flipping through the channels. Yeah, well, there's nothing really on TV. I'm just zoning out. I'm really hungry. Oh, you're hungry? You want to go get food? Yeah, I guess we could go get food. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Because in story, you don't have to be like, in real life, if like somebody came over, they'd be like, yo, what's up, man? Hey, good to see you, man. What's going on? Not much, right? That we don't put real life in narrative is not narrative. It's just what's happening. The narrative is the subcontext of what is going on. Somebody comes over. Maybe we're going to have game night. Let's just say we're going to have game night. Having game night would be the ultimate narrative, right? Because maybe, let's say it's a short, like we're writing a short, and the narrative is game night is coming over. 4 people are going to show up. They're going to play Risk. Risk is the best game ever. They're going to play Risk, and let's say by playing Risk, it's going to create an argument and a battle between the 4 people because there's something deeper going on, which the battle they are fighting on the board is turning out to be a battle that's 1 or 2 of the players actually know is going on, and this is how they're confronting their other friends. And at the end of the night, they make up. They make up, and they realize, life, just like the game, it happens, right? So in real life, there would be all that filler. There would be, right? You would have tons of fluff. The first friend would show up. Hey, is Jim here yet? And no, all right, I guess. And then he sits on the chair and or the couch, and he's waiting. Hey, do you want something to drink? Yeah, I'll get something to drink. All right, what do you want? What do you got? I got water, Coke. I got a beer. All right, you know what? Can I have a beer? All right, I'll get you a beer. That's literally real life, but there's zero narrative. So we're not saying more or less, and we aren't writing what needs to happen straight. But this is the thing: once we do write all that, you can go back to that scene with Steve and Mike, and you can add, and again, if you've earned the pages, say more with less, which we did with that first scene. And let's say we want a 90-minute film, 90-page film, and we end up with 80 pages. Now we can go back to that first scene, and where he goes, it's me, Saturday's our 15 years anniversary. I don't know if we'd really consider that important because we've never slept together. Well, once we did. We do the hotel. Well, once when I went on vacation with her family, yeah, it would have been appropriate. But now we're in our 30s. It's not that inappropriate. And then we could add the fluff, which is, would it be inappropriate if we went and got some food right now and just went Dutch? And then Mike says, well, if I get to pick the restaurant, I'll be happy to pay for it. See, be careful. It sounds like we're in a relationship. And Mike says, well, it's still young yet. You could cut it there, but the fluff might be. It could be. Do you want to go? Would it be inappropriate if we go out to eat and we pay Dutch? And Mike might say, well, it's between watching television. It's between watching 17 shows, sitting here doing nothing, or going out to eat with my best friend. It's not that big of a deal. And Stevie goes, I think you've made a choice, right? And then we can go back to the other line, and Mike says, I don't mind paying as long as I get to pick. I'll pay for the whole thing as long as I get to pick the restaurant. And then Steve goes, all right, sounds good to me. But we don't even have to say, all right, sounds good to me. We could literally cut it. But if we're adding fluff, and he goes, yeah, it's starting to sound like we are boyfriend. We are in a relationship. And Mike would be like, the night's young. And then Steve goes, we might have to stop at the convenience store to get some condoms. Okay, so now what we did is, now obviously we're leading more towards a comedy than a drama. However, I think comedy and drama is stronger. But we just added the fluff. All the condom thing is a throwaway line. It's fluff. But in the beginning, before I added those 2 lines of fluff, which is the ultimately, it's either sitting here watching 17 shows or go get food with my best friend, and we need to stop and get condoms, is we hit all our beats. We seeded as much as we could, and we said more than we had to, and we moved that narrative, and that scene was done. That was a tight scene, and that was my first draft, and that's how you have to look at it. I still would go back once I'm done, and I will earn the fluff, and I might add those fluff. Maybe I want to pop more jokes in there. Okay, but the other thing is, like, if you are writing a comedy, a book or a script, and it's a 90-minute movie, you might want to write like an 80-page or even a 75-page script, because in a comedy there's a lot of improv, and some of the actors who are good performers when it comes to comedy, improv, and stuff like that, you might want them to play around a little bit. Anyway, all right, so that's it. Get the most out of your narrative. There you go. Hit our beats, seed when possible, say more with less to earn fluff, write what needs to happen straight to the point, and that's how you get the most out of narrative. Writing a story, a movie, a book, or even a song is not about what looks cool, what's a cool scene, what is something I want to happen that would be an amazing moment. If the amazing moment has nothing to do with the overall narrative is basically the story that happens or unfolds before the reader or the watcher's eyes. So that's why you have your outline. And if you look at your outline and says Bruce Banner meets Aquaman, and Aquaman's like, I am not interested in saving the world, right? Because he's Aquaman. Why would he be interested, right? Right? You're just, that's a weak scene. So just write out, like I said with Mike, Steve has been with the sister for 2 years, and everything, right? So write out your story mission, and then figure out the ending, the middle, figure out the moments that are beats, strong beats. How do we get Mike to approve the relationship? What is the biggest gesture for Mike to approve the relationship? He officiates it. What is the conflict? How do we create a good conflict? Steve wants to tell Mike, but he's nervous because he's been hiding it for 2 years. And the thing is, Steve really wants to marry her, so it's not just a fling. Clearly, after 2 years, but he finally chooses that he wants to say it. But before he actually tells Mike, Mike finds out another way that Steve and his sister are actually together, and that causes the rift. Boom! I write that out. Now I have to start plotting that out. How do I make that happen? How do I see that? And in my outline, I'll start moving it into scenes. And I might write some dialogue, but it probably won't be the dialogue I end up using in my outline. And then when I write a script or a story, I allow the characters, who they are, their personalities, which is a whole other video of like how to create character. I allow them to dictate the movement. So there you go. But anyway, Track Killer, thanks on Twitch. Thanks for staying for 50 minutes. Wow. I went a long time with it. I get passionate about craft and writing. I'm what I do for a living. I literally write scripts for a living. I script doctor. I did this. I teach writing. This is like I love writing. Anyway, like, comment, share, and work, grow, and rise together. We want to elevate the people around us. So what we learn, we try to educate others. Right. Anyway, I'm here Monday through Fridays. We try to do 4:30. We might be moving it to 5, but right now it's always 4:30. Take care, be good, and be kind to yourself.